Crystal chandeliers sparkled above Janet Rucker like frozen tears as she stood at the altar of the most beautiful cathedral she'd ever seen. White roses hung from silk ribbons, cascading around them in clouds of perfection. Her off-shoulder gown, designer silk, not the borrowed dress she'd expected, felt too expensive for a girl who still smelled like coffee and grease from double shifts at Romano's diner. She was nobody, a 23-year-old waitress who'd traded her stained apron for white tulle, believing in fairy tales that didn't exist for girls like her. Then she noticed her groom wasn't looking at her. Alejandro Fiorentino's tattooed fingers, ink wrapping around each knuckle, were scrolling across his phone screen. The officiant cleared his throat. Guests began whispering. But Alejandro kept reading, kept typing, his neck tattoo visible as he hunched over the device like it was more important than their vows. Another text notification lit up his face. His tattooed thumbs moved frantically. Janet's stomach dropped. Among the well-dressed guests in dark suits, one man stood apart. Tall, imposing, with a presence that made the air feel heavier. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Janet made in 6 months, and 2 men flanked him like silent guardians. She didn't know who he was, but when his dark eyes found hers across the cathedral, something in her chest tightened. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd already solved. "I need a moment," Alejandro muttered, his fingers still flying across the screen. He walked away from the altar mid-ceremony, phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. Janet followed on shaking legs, her borrowed heels clicking against marble floors. Through the antechamber door, she glimpsed his phone screen over his shoulder, reading the text thread that would shatter her world. "Sarah, I need you. Please don't do this. I love you. Alejandro, I love you too, baby." "Sarah, then why are you marrying her?" "Alejandro, this wedding was a mistake. I'm coming to you now." The expensive gown suddenly felt like a costume against Janet's skin. The crystal chandeliers, the cascading roses, the jeweled headpiece, all props in a performance where she was never the bride. Just collateral in a text-coordinated scheme. Janet wasn't a wife. She was a transaction, abandoned at the altar for a text message. "Hey, welcome back, my beautiful family. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me. Your love and support mean everything." If you're excited for today's story and ready to soak it all in, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Tomorrow, I've got another captivating story lined up for you, and believe me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. Janet's hand shot out before she could think, yanking the phone from Alejandro's tattooed fingers. His eyes went wide with panic as she scrolled upward through the text thread, watching weeks of lies unspool before her. "Alejandro, just got the cathedral for cheap. She doesn't know any better." "Sarah, I can't believe you're actually going through with this." "Alejandro, it's the only way to stall your father. Once we're married, he can't touch me." "Sarah, and after? You promise you'll come back to me?" "Alejandro, always, baby. She means nothing." The phone trembled in Janet's grip. Nothing. She meant nothing. The cathedral with its crystal and white roses, the designer gown she'd thought was a gift, all carefully calculated props in Alejandro's desperate scheme to dodge a debt to Alberto Trevisani, Sarah's mob boss father. "Janet, please." Alejandro reached for the phone, his voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like." She took a step back, still scrolling. Financial texts about gambling losses. Desperate messages about borrowed money. Cold negotiations about the collateral. Her. The cathedral's antechamber suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "You used me." Her voice came out flat, dead. "I was never a bride. I was insurance. I can't explain. I want an annulment." Janet looked up from the screen, meeting his eyes for the first time since their fake vows. "Tonight. Right now. This marriage is over before it started." Alejandro's face flushed red. "You can't just..." But Janet was already moving, her borrowed heels clicking sharply against marble as she stormed back toward the main cathedral. Guests turned to stare as she swept down the center aisle, still clutching both her wilted bouquet and Alejandro's phone like evidence at a crime scene. Her mother reached for her, face crumpled with confusion, but Janet couldn't stop. If she stopped, she'd shatter. The cathedral doors burst open into cold October air. Janet's breath came in ragged gasps, her expensive gown suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. She needed to run, to disappear, to... A black SUV idled at the curb, sleek and predatory. The man from inside the cathedral, the one who'd watched everything with those dark, knowing eyes, stood beside it. Leonardo Lo Duca. Up close, he was even more devastating. Sharp jawline, olive skin, a small scar above his left eyebrow. His charcoal suit spoke of wealth and danger in equal measure. "You saw," Janet whispered, not quite a question. "I saw a man text his ex-girlfriend during his wedding vows," Leonardo said quietly, his voice carrying an Italian accent that made even terrible truths sound almost poetic. "I saw a woman discover she'd been used." One of his men appeared with a long black coat, women's, expensive, smelling of leather and luxury. Leonardo held it out. "It's cold, and you look like you could use somewhere to go." Janet should have run. Should have called anyone else. But this dangerous stranger was the only person who'd actually seen her tonight. Not as collateral or insurance or nothing. Just seen her. She took the coat. The SUV's leather interior smelled like money and danger. Janet's fingers moved mechanically across Alejandro's phone screen, each swipe revealing another layer of betrayal. The city lights blurred past tinted windows as she read text after text, her vision swimming. A man in the passenger seat turned around, younger, sharp-eyed, with the same dangerous confidence that radiated from Leonardo. "Ms. Rucker, I'm Dimitri Minaldo. We need to download that data before your husband realizes what you took." Husband. The word tasted like poison. Dimitri handed her a small device. "Connect the phone here. It'll back up everything, texts, photos, call logs. All of it." Janet's hands shook as she plugged in the cable. The screen flashed, backup in progress. While the progress bar crawled forward, she kept scrolling, unable to look away from the carnage of her own stupidity. "Marco, Trevisani associate boss, wants confirmation the collateral is secured." "Alejandro, wedding's tomorrow. Debt gets extended once I'm married, right?" "Marco, 6 months. Don't screw this up." 6 months. That's all she'd been worth. Half a year of breathing room for a desperate man drowning in gambling debts. She found financial texts next. Screen after screen of casino losses, sports betting, poker games that bled money like open wounds. $200,000, borrowed for business investment, poured down the drain of Alejandro's addiction. And when the Trevisani family came collecting, he'd found a solution. Marry a nobody waitress who wouldn't ask questions. Keep reading. Leonardo's voice was quiet beside her, not cruel, just factual. You need to see all of it. The romantic texts were worse somehow. Messages between Alejandro and Sarah that never stopped, even while he was proposing to Janet over cheap wine in her cramped studio apartment. Even while he was promising her a better life, he was texting Sarah. "Just playing the long game, baby. I'll be back in your bed before you know it." Janet's throat closed. The backup device beeped. 100% complete. "I had him investigated 2 weeks ago," Leonardo said as Dimitri carefully disconnected the phone and handed Janet a USB drive. "Alejandro tried to borrow from my organization. I saw his text patterns, desperate, dishonest, dangerous. Men like that make bad investments." "So you knew?" Janet's voice came out hollow. "You knew what he was doing to me. I knew he was marrying someone who didn't deserve it." Leonardo's dark eyes met hers. "That's why I was there tonight. To see if my suspicions were correct." The SUV pulled up to a gleaming hotel, the Meridian, all marble steps and golden lights spilling onto the street. Janet looked down at her wedding gown, at the borrowed heels, at the USB drive containing the digital autopsy of her failed marriage. "I'm offering you a suite," Leonardo said. "Safe. Private. Yours for as long as you need to figure out what comes next. No strings." Janet should have refused. Should have seen the danger in accepting help from a man who traveled with armed bodyguards and investigated people for sport. But Leonardo Lo Duca was the only person who'd seen her as human tonight. Not collateral. Not insurance. Not nothing. Human. She took the USB drive and nodded. The Meridian suite was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked too expensive to touch, but Janet couldn't breathe in it. Her phone had been buzzing for hours, each notification like a wasp sting. You stole my phone, you bitch. You ruined everything. This is your fault. You'll pay for embarrassing me. Alejandro's texts came rapid fire, one after another, his desperation bleeding through the screen. Janet's hands shook as she read them, her wedding dress still pooled on the bathroom floor like a discarded skin. By evening, the suite's walls felt like they were closing in. She changed into the hotel robe and ventured downstairs to the bar, just for one drink, just to be around people who weren't screaming at her through text messages. The space was dark and sophisticated, all leather booths and soft jazz. Janet perched on a bar stool and ordered vodka on the rocks because wine felt too romantic and beer felt too sad. She was halfway through her second when someone slid onto the stool beside her. Male cologne, expensive. A suit that whispered money. But when she turned, the eyes looking back at her were cold, predator's eyes. "You're the girl from the cathedral," the man said. Not a question. Fiorentino's collateral. Janet's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." He pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward her. Text messages from someone named Marco. Lo Duca's got the girl. She's his acquisition now. Could be leverage. Another message. Boss's daughter wants Fiorentino back. The texts prove he loves her. The girl's disposable. "I'm Antonio Lorenzo," the man continued, and his hand shot out, grabbing Janet's wrist hard enough to bruise. "Alberto Trevisani's my boss. His daughter Sarah really wants your husband back. And you're in my way." Pain lanced up Janet's arm. The bartender had conveniently disappeared. She was alone with a man who saw her as an obstacle to remove. Then someone cleared their throat behind them. A polite, almost gentle sound. Antonio's had whipped around, and his face went pale. Leonardo Lo Duca stood there in his perfectly tailored suit, flanked by Dimitri and another enforcer, looking like violence wrapped in expensive fabric. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes were dead. "Remove your hand," Leonardo said quietly.
"Now."
Antonio released her so fast Janet stumbled. Leonardo moved closer, and Antonio actually backed up. "You are touching what's mine," Leonardo continued, his voice never rising above conversational. "After I made it very clear what would happen if anyone tried." He plucked Antonio's phone from his hand, his thumb moving across the screen. Screenshots. Evidence. Then he handed it back. "You're no longer welcome in any establishment I own or protect. That's most of the city. Leave now, or I'll decide examples need to be made." Antonio fled. Leonardo turned to Janet, his entire demeanor shifting. The cold violence disappeared, replaced by concern. "Did he hurt you?" Janet looked down at her wrist. Red marks, already bruising. "Come," Leonardo said gently. "Let me show you somewhere actually safe." This time, Janet didn't hesitate. She took his hand. Leonardo's estate was nothing like the cramped studio apartment Janet had shared with Alejandro. Stone and glass rose against the night sky, fountains sparkling in the courtyard, windows glowing with warm light that felt like a promise of safety. A woman appeared at the door. Older, Italian, with kind eyes and an apron dusted with flour. She took one look at Janet's bruised wrist and the wedding gown stuffed in a bag, then started speaking rapid Italian to Leonardo. Her tone was part scolding, part concern, all maternal instinct. "This is Giorgia Trevisano," Leonardo said. "She'll take care of you." Within an hour, Janet was bathed, fed, and installed in a guest room that felt more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever stayed. But her phone kept buzzing. Different numbers now. Alejandro had figured out she'd blocked him. "You can't hide forever. I'll find you. This isn't over." Dimitri appeared each time with his tablet, documenting every message. "Harassment case," he explained. "For your annulment." Over the next week, a strange routine developed. Georgia cooked elaborate meals while teaching Janet Italian phrases. Leonardo worked in his study, occasionally emerging for dinners that grew longer, more intimate. He told her about Priscilla Iadanza, the woman he loved, the woman his father had killed for being from the wrong world. "I won't let another innocent person be crushed by my world," he said one night, candlelight casting shadows across his face. "That includes you." Janet found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. About feeling invisible at the diner. About believing Aleandro's cathedral and designer gown were proof someone finally saw her worth. About being so desperately wrong. One night, unable to sleep, Janet opened her laptop. The cloud backup Dmitri had created sat in her downloads folder, innocuous and devastating. She clicked it open. Hundreds of messages between Aleandro and Sarah spanning 8 months. The entire timeline of their relationship laid bare. His proposal to Janet happened the same week he was texting Sarah. "Just need to buy time. I'll be back before you know it." Tears blurred her vision as she scrolled. Every kiss had been a lie. Every promise, calculated manipulation. Leonardo appeared in the doorway, drawn by some instinct. He sat beside her without a word, his presence solid and real in a way Aleandro's never was. "Read them all," he said quietly. "See everything. Then delete what you don't need." Janet read until her eyes burned. Then, with Leonardo's hand warm on her shoulder, she began deleting. Every harassing text Aleandro had sent. Every desperate threat. She kept only what Dmitri needed for court: cold, factual evidence. Each deletion felt like reclaiming herself, erasing his power, taking back control. "You control the narrative now," Leonardo said. "Not the coward who hid behind screens." Janet closed the laptop and turned to look at him. Really look at him. This dangerous man who'd shown her more genuine care in a week than Aleandro had in months. "Thank you," she whispered. Leonardo's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You're not collateral anymore, Janet. You're a person. Start believing it." For the first time, she almost did. 3 weeks dissolved into a rhythm Janet had never known existed. Mornings in the kitchen with Georgia, learning to knead dough and conjugate Italian verbs. Afternoons taking online business courses in Leonardo's library, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Evenings with Leonardo, dinners that stretched long, conversations that felt like coming home. The annulment came through on a Tuesday. Dmitri presented the papers with a satisfied smile. The text evidence made it easy. Fraudulent intent, ongoing affair, use of marriage for debt manipulation. Judge didn't even hesitate. Janet stared at the document. Legally, her marriage to Aleandro Fiorentino had never existed. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt untethered, like gravity had shifted and she was still learning how to stand. Leonardo found her on the terrace that evening, the city lights spreading below like fallen stars. He didn't ask if she was okay, he knew better. He simply stood beside her, solid and present in a way that made her breath catch. "You're free," he said quietly. "I don't know what that means yet." His hand found hers, warm and certain. No grabbing, no claiming, just offering. Janet's fingers intertwined with his, and something in her chest loosened. Her phone buzzed. Another new number. Another message from Aleandro. "You'll regret this." Leonardo took the phone from her hand before she could react. His thumb moved across the screen. Block, delete. Then he set it face down on the terrace table and cupped her face instead, his touch gentle despite the calluses she noticed, despite the violence he was clearly capable of. "No more screens between us," he said, his dark eyes holding hers. "No more hiding. I'm here, Janet. Present. Choosing you." The contrast hit her like a physical thing. Aleandro, texting his ex during their wedding vows, his tattooed thumbs more interested in a screen than her face. Leonardo, setting aside technology to actually see her. "I'm not running from this anymore," Janet whispered. "From you. From what I feel." Leonardo's kiss was nothing like the dry peck Aleandro had given her at the altar. It was heat and promise and the terrifying vulnerability of being truly seen. His hands were reverent as he led her inside, up the stairs, to his bedroom where everything felt inevitable and right. They made love with no phones, no texts, no digital interference. Just hands and breath, and the shocking intimacy of being completely present with another person. Leonardo touched her like she was precious, like she mattered, like every part of her deserved attention and care. Afterward, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets with Leonardo's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Janet finally understood the difference between being used and being valued. Between a man who hid behind screens and one who showed up, fully human, fully present. Between collateral and chosen. She was choosing this. Choosing him. Choosing herself. Finally. Antonio Lorenzo's body was found in an alley at dawn. 2 bullets to the head, execution style. The kind of kill that carried a signature deliberate and professional. By noon, every media outlet in the city was running the story. By evening, Leonardo's phone was ringing with threats. Janet watched from the library as Leonardo's estate transformed into a war room. Dimitri and Michelino Pinto moved with grim efficiency, laptops open, phones pressed to ears. The easy warmth of the past weeks evaporated, replaced by something cold and tactical. The evidence points to you, Dimitri told Leonardo, his voice tight. Ballistics match guns from your family's arsenal. The dump site is in your territory. Alberto Trevisani is calling for blood. Janet's stomach twisted. She'd just found something real with Leonardo, and now it was unraveling because of mob politics she didn't understand. Leonardo stood at the window, his shoulders rigid. I didn't order this hit. Trevisani doesn't care. His enforcer is dead. Someone pays. For 3 days, the estate operated under lockdown. Georgia cooked mechanically, her usual chatter gone. Janet felt useless, watching Leonardo age in real time under the weight of a war he didn't start. Then Dimitri burst into the study, laptop in hand, his face alight with something between fury and triumph. I found something. Intercepted texts from a burner phone. He turned the screen toward Leonardo and Janet. Text messages between 2 contacts labeled only as AF and TS.
You need Lorenzo did.
Make it look like Lo Duca's work. TS. Payment up front. AF. Half now. Half after the job. I'm attaching Lo Duca's usual methods. TS. Done. When? AF. Tonight. Text me proof. Janet's blood turned to ice.
AF.
Alejandro Fiorentino. And TS is Terry Sheldon, Dimitri confirmed. Known mercenary. Works for the highest bidder. Leonardo's jaw clenched as he scrolled through more messages. The digital trail was damning. Alejandro had researched Leonardo's family's methods, hired someone to replicate them perfectly, then planted evidence to frame him for Antonio's murder. Why? Janet whispered, though she already knew. To start a war, Leonardo said, his voice deadly calm. Trevisani and Lo Duca families destroy each other. In the chaos, Alejandro's debt gets erased. He steals money, disappears with Sarah. Dimitri scrolled to the final messages, dated yesterday. Janet's breath caught. TS. The war isn't catching. Trevisani's holding back. AF. Then we move to Plan B. TS, which is?
Illegalität girl.
Lo Duca's weakness. Grab her. Force his hand. The room went silent except for the sound of Janet's heart pounding in her ears. Leonardo turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw real fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. He's coming for you, Leonardo said quietly. And this time, he won't use text messages. Dimitri was already moving, pulling out his phone. I'm calling in every favor we have. Full security detail. She doesn't leave this estate. But Janet knew, with terrible certainty, that walls wouldn't be enough. Alejandro was desperate, cornered, and he'd already proven he'd do anything to escape his consequences. The crash came at 3 a.m., glass shattering, George's scream cutting short. Janet bolted upright in bed as her door burst open. Alejandro stood there, gun in hand, his tattooed fingers wrapped around the grip like they'd always belonged there. In the cathedral, Those tattoos had seemed artistic, rebellious. Now they looked like what they were, marks of a man without honor, without conscience. Get up. His voice was flat, dead.
Now.
Alejandro, please. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her arm, the gun pressed cold against her ribs. I said now. Downstairs, Georgia lay crumpled by the kitchen door, blood trickling from her temple. Janet's scream died in her throat as Alejandro dragged her toward the side entrance, where a stolen van waited, engine running. Leonardo will kill you for this, Janet gasped as he shoved her inside. He'll have to find me first. Alejandro's smile was manic, desperate. The gun never wavered. The warehouse smelled like rust and rot. Terry Sheldon waited inside, military build, cold eyes, camera, equipment set up like this was a professional production. Alejandro forced Janet into a chair, zip-tying her wrists behind her back with practiced efficiency. Here's how this works, Alejandro said, shoving his phone at her face. The camera was already recording. You beg Lo Duca for your life. Tell him $500,000 and I let you go. Make it good, or Terry starts breaking fingers. The camera's red light blinked. Janet's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about the cathedral, about Alejandro's thumbs moving across his phone screen while she stood in a wedding dress, about weeks of texts calling her nothing, collateral, disposable. She looked directly into the camera. Leonardo, you're watching a coward who texted his ex-girlfriend during our wedding vows. He left me at the altar for a text message. Her voice was steady, clear. He never saw me as real. That was his mistake. You see me, and I know you're coming. Alejandro's face went purple with rage. What did you? He lunged for the phone, but Janet had already pressed send with her nose before he grabbed it, the video uploading in real time to the cloud. You stupid bitch. Alejandro screamed, his tattooed hands shaking as he watched the upload complete. Somewhere, Leonardo's team was already tracing the signal, triangulating the location. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at her head. Terry Sheldon suddenly straightened, his hand going to his earpiece. We got company, Terry said, his professional calm cracking. Multiple vehicles. Moving fast. In the distance, sirens wailed. Alejandro's gun trembled in his grip, his face a mask of desperation and rage. The warehouse doors were the only exit, and Leonardo Lo Duca was coming through them. Janet smiled. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Leonardo entered like a force of nature, Dimitri and Michelino flanking him, guns drawn. Behind them, police detectives in tactical gear, Sean Stith and Albert Amos, Janet recognized from the news. Leonardo had brought legitimate law enforcement. This wasn't mob justice. This was legal reckoning. Terry Sheldon assessed the situation in 2 seconds flat, dropped his weapon, and raised his hands. I'm just hired help. Don't shoot. Alejandro spun, grabbing Janet from behind, his gun pressed to her temple. She felt his heart hammering against her back, smelled his fierce sweat mixing with desperation. Stay back. Alejandro screamed, his tattooed hand shaking. I'll kill her. I swear to God I'll. She's worthless. His voice cracked. She's just a waitress. She means nothing. Leonardo's expression was carved from ice. He raised his weapon with practiced precision. She's worth more than your entire miserable existence. The shot was surgical. Alejandro's shoulder, not his heart. He crumpled, screaming, the gun clattering away. Janet collapsed as Leonardo closed the distance, cutting her zip ties with a knife that appeared from nowhere. His arms wrapped around her, solid and real, and she shattered against his chest. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. I've got you. Detective Stith read Alejandro his rights while paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher. Detective Amos collected evidence, the camera, Terry's equipment, Alejandro's phone still showing the uploaded video. 3 days later, Janet sat in Leonardo's study while Dimitri presented the case file to Alberto Trevisani's lawyers. The digital evidence was damning and complete. The text thread from the wedding day, Alejandro and Sarah's messages during sacred vows, proving fraudulent intent. Financial texts showing the $200,000 gambling debt the borrowed money meant for business poured into casinos. Text messages with Terry Sheldon arranging Antonio Lorenzo's murder, complete with instructions to frame Leonardo. Dozens of harassing texts to Janet from multiple burner phones, each one documented and time-stamped. Screenshots of conversations discussing Janet as collateral and insurance. The video Janet recorded at the warehouse, her refusal to beg, Leandro's rage, everything preserved in the cloud. Sarah W. Connolly testified against him. She'd read every text, finally seeing how Leandro had manipulated her father's organization, how he'd used her feelings as leverage, how his promises were lies stacked on lies. "I thought he loved me," Sarah said in her deposition, her voice hollow. "But he only loved what I could give him." The charges were extensive: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, harassment, attempted homicide. The texts Leandro thought were private conversations became public evidence, each message another nail in his legal coffin. Alberto Trevisani formally apologized to Leonardo. The mob war was averted. Antonio's real killer was facing justice. Leandro Fiorentino had destroyed himself with his own digital trail, every text, every screenshot, every message preserved forever in the cloud. Janet deleted his contact from her phone for the final time. But this time it felt different. Not like running. Like closing a door that should never have opened. 6 months later, sunlight streamed through the estate's kitchen windows, turning flour dust into gold. Janet's hands moved with practiced confidence, kneading rosemary bread beside Georgia, whose temple scar had faded to a thin white line. They spoke in Italian now, Janet's accent still rough, but improving. "Più farina," Georgia instructed, and Janet added more flour, laughing when some scattered across the counter. She was different now. Confident. The advanced business courses she was taking online had led to consulting work, helping small restaurants optimize their operations. She taught English to Georgia's teenage daughter 3 afternoons a week. She'd stopped feeling like a guest in Leonardo's home and started feeling like it was hers too. Her phone sat on the counter, mostly ignored these days. But she still kept one screenshot in her photos, Leandro's text to Sarah from the wedding altar. "This wedding was a mistake. I'm coming to you now." Not as a wound, but as a reminder of what she'd survived, of how far she'd come. Leandro was serving 25 years. The text messages had been key evidence. Every digital conversation, every threatening message, every cold calculation preserved forever. Sarah had testified against him after reading the full scope of his manipulation, her voice steady in court as she described how he'd used her father's organization and her feelings as tools. The Lo Duca and Trevisani families had made cautious peace. Alberto had even sent a gift when he heard Janet was teaching his granddaughter English, an olive branch wrapped in expensive wine. That evening, Janet found Leonardo on the terrace, the city lights spreading below like a blanket of stars brought to earth. He pulled her close, and she noticed both their phones were inside, face down on the kitchen counter, forgotten. "You saved me as much as I saved you," Leonardo said quietly, his fingers intertwined with hers. "You reminded me what protecting something real means. No screens, no hiding, just us." Janet looked up at him. This dangerous man who'd chosen to be present, to be real, to see her as human when everyone else saw collateral. "He left me at the altar for a text message," she said. "You stayed with me, present real, choosing me every day. That's the difference between being used and being loved." Leonardo kissed her forehead, her nose, finally her lips. Gentle, reverent, completely there. Later, in the quiet of her room, Janet opened her phone one last time. She found the screenshot of Leandro's text and hovered her thumb over the delete button. She didn't need it anymore. Didn't need proof of her survival. She was living it. She pressed delete. The screen went blank, and Janet smiled. She was finally home, in a relationship where love was spoken out loud, not typed into a screen, where presence mattered more than pixels, where she was chosen every single day. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to subscribe and be part of a community that cherishes unforgettable tales like this one. Your support means more than you know. It fuels the creation of even more stories that speak to the heart. So, whether you're watching from your TV or your phone, take a moment to join us. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Thank you for being a part of this journey.